Welcome into Four Downs, our game recap episode here at the Flight Plan. Brutal loss on Sunday, 10-9. So many chances to win the game. We're going to break down four key themes to the game. That's what we do in the four down episode, from the penalties to the coaching. I'm Tim McMaster. He's Zack Rosenblatt, Jets reporter at The Athletic. Zach, it felt like we were watching the 2023 Jets. Zach Wilson was even there.
Yeah. I forget who pointed it out to me, but it was as if we were watching the 2023 Jets, only Greg Zuerlein missed a field goal, which was not the 2023
Right.
Jets. If anything, he was their only source of offense last year. But yeah, that was a highly disappointing effort on so many levels that we're going to get into. But the fact that they came out with that effort, that game plan, that lack of focus, after 10 days of rest, just reflects so poorly on the coaching staff, in my opinion. And the players deserve blame too, obviously. But, this has been a recurring theme for this Jets staff. Like, when they have more time is weirdly when they're at their worst. And it just makes no sense. And they did so many confounding things. There were so many confounding errors. The same stuff they used to do last year. Again, I don't want to spoil everything. Everybody knows where we're going with this pod. I think anyone who watched that game knows what we're going to talk about. And I wrote my story last night and I'm working on some more. It's all obvious because we've gone down this road. The only difference is we have Aaron Rodgers at the quarterback position that we're covering. And this was supposed to be the difference. And clearly a lot of the same problems they had last year are not gone. You go against a really good defense. Robert Saleh can keep saying, that was a top 5 defense, but it feels like he said more than 5 times now since the start of the preseason. You could say that these are top 5 defenses, but you're supposed to overcome that. And you can't. Every year, it's like, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. Well, why aren't you ready to go at the beginning of the season? It's infuriating. This team is never ready at the beginning of the year. They always, it's like they're learning on the fly. What was the point of training camp in the preseason? And they just, I a lot of problems with the way they've approached some things. But, at the end of the day, they do have talent, and you can fight with me on that. Some people have and will, but they have the talent on paper. I think they really do. You saw flashes of it in that Patriots game. They need to beat good teams. They need to beat average teams. The Broncos are an average team. They're not a good team. Their quarterback got 60 yards and the Jets lost. He had negative passing yards at halftime and it was close. This was just an absolute disaster. And this feels like it's going to be a game that we look back on at the end of the season as a turning point, either in the good or bad direction. Either this lights a fire under their ass, or this is the moment where we look back and we say, this is where we realize that this was going to be a bad season. So, how they bounce back from this, and we'll get into what's upcoming. They have a tough stretch coming. And yeah, I'm coming into this pod last week and going on, Joe's pod with Connor last week. I was talking about how the vibes were so good, and I feel the opposite now. So I'm very curious to see how they bounce back, and let's get into it though.
What a difference a week makes.
Yeah.
First down.
Man.
The AI first down guy is going crazy.
The loop track button was on. Anyway, first down, penalties, 13 for 90 yards, 10 on the offense, 5 pre-snap. Let's just start offensive line overall, Zach. We'll take it from the penalties, but Tyron Smith looked old on Sunday. This offensive line looked disjointed. We had talked about the offensive line taking steps forward, and hey, the offensive line wasn't a problem. They were a problem.
Yeah, there's so many different ways to talk about it. I mean, Tyron Smith is a good place to start, but Olu Fashanu, it's not a game where you panic about a rookie struggling in his first game at a new position. I think he was maybe worse than I expected, but the Broncos were bringing blitzes and the Jets were just not prepared for it. And I don't know why they weren't prepared for it. This is how the Broncos defense has operated. And, you have Breece Hall saying things like how he was feeling antsy out there about the blitzes. And, that just screams lack of preparation from, the offensive coordinator. That's Nathaniel Hackett. They were not prepared for what the Broncos threw at them. There was a lot of free blitzers. I think, Elijah Vera-Tucker asked him after the game about the O-line's performance. And he said, if you watch the tape, we busted our ass out there. I think the implication being that it wasn't entirely on us, the problems. Breece had to pick up a lot of blitzes. If you're relying that much on a running back to pick up blocks, then it's a problem. And yeah, Tyron Smith has allowed 3 sacks in 4 games. And I tweeted this out. He hasn't allowed 3 sacks in a season since 2017. And I asked Robert Saleh today about, how has Tyron Smith played? And he said, he's getting comfortable still. Like, well, he's like 35 years old. Why is it just taking this long to get comfortable? He practiced entire training camp. He was here in OTAs and mini camp. He takes some rest days, but he was pretty much full go most of the summer. I know they've rested him a lot in camp, and he played 3 times in 10 days, and maybe that's all a factor. But this is 2 weeks in a row where I don't think Tyron's been particularly good. So it's too early to panic about him. Like, he's a pro, and if anybody can bounce back, it's him. But that was concerning. And yeah, just in general, like, Rodgers got hit, I think 14 times. I believe True Media had him at 22 pressures, sacked 5 times. He was constantly under duress. Sometimes he's holding onto the ball too long, but generally the O-line just was not giving him room to operate. And it was very disappointing because the O-line had felt like a strength through 3 games. And you come out of this game, like, I'm not ready to declare that this is a bad group or anything like that, but you're about to face some defenses that are as good, if not better, than Denver's, in Minnesota, who blitzes a lot also. So, we're going to find out pretty quickly if they learn their lesson. The Bills defense, the personnel's not as good as it has been in past years, but they're a very well-coached team. The Patriots defense, and then you have the Texans after that, and the Texans have a lot of talent. So these are some not easy opponents coming up, and the offensive line needs to hold up better. And, I don't know, and we'll get into this when we get into the coaching, but I don't know, maybe you retire the Solomon Thomas at fullback package on the goal line, because that was a disaster for reasons other than Solomon Thomas. But, stop trying to be cute with that thing. It's not that clever. It's not that creative. Anyway, we'll get into that in a future down, but it just all like ties together. So it's hard not to infringe on the other stuff. But yeah, the O-line had a really bad game, and the run blocking, Breece Hall and Braylon Allen both looked like different players out there. You wonder how much of that had to do with the blocking, but overall, just the O-line needs to be better. I think everybody in the building knows that.
And a lot of the penalties from the O-line was false starts because of the cadence, which became a big topic after the game. Saleh was asked about the cadence first, and he said, maybe we're not good enough to deal with all the different changes and cadence shifts that Aaron Rodgers likes to do at the game. Well, that came through to the Aaron Rodgers portion of the post game. We'll play that, and then Saleh talked about it again today. But first, here's Rodgers last night.
The cadence specifically, Robert said that might be something you guys have to dial back a little bit. Is that something you think could potentially help the situation?
It's one way to do it. The other way is hold them accountable. I mean, we haven't had an issue. We've had 1 false start. Morgan had 1 false start, I believe, until this. So, it's been a weapon. We use it every day in practice. We don't, we rarely have a false start. And to have, 5 today, it seemed like 4 or 5. Yeah, it seems like an outlier. I don't know if we need to make mass changes based on, kind of an outlier game.
So Rodgers is the one settling things down. You could tell early on there he was a little bit annoyed at the thought that, like, yeah, because they can't handle it, we should shut this down. Accountability could be like the theme of this episode, I think, Zach, because there just doesn't seem to be much. But Robert Saleh got a chance to clarify today when you guys were talking to him, and this is what he said about his comments Sunday and cadence overall.
What specifically did you mean then, Robert, when you said that you guys maybe weren't good enough or ready for the cadence yet?
So cadence is all part of operation, and the finishing line on that statement was operation, and our operation had been good up until yesterday. Obviously, there's things that showed up, and it's something that I think we can definitely get fixed.
I would say that he knew he was going to get asked a question, and he did everything he could to figure out how to successfully go back on kind of what he had said on Sunday without just saying I was wrong.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I get out of that, Zach, where he's just trying to, like, well, the end of what I said was operations. Which wasn't what he said. And I don't know. How did you take it?
I mean, it was, again, just messaging is poor from this team. I think Robert probably made a mistake saying what he did. And I don't know if Rodgers and him talked or if he saw what Rodgers said in his press conference where Aaron was pretty clearly perturbed. I wouldn't classify this as a rift between the two. I think Aaron was just frustrated probably with the line of questioning and what Robert probably said after the game. But yeah, ultimately, like, this was always going to be a thing, and it always has been a thing for Aaron. You talk about the hand signals and the cadence, especially in the latter stages of his Packers time. Like when Aaron Rodgers is at his best, it's when he's able to, draw the defense off sides, get them off balance with his cadence, with his hard counts. And when the offense is on the same page, it works like magic. And when it's not, and a lot of times, again, this is the latter stage of his Packers career, when he's had like young guys on his team, whether that's on the O-line or a receiver, that's when they've struggled to adjust to it. And when the cadence is tricking your players more than the others, then it's an issue. And it wasn't an issue the first 3 weeks. The time management was like they had a lot of the delay of game stuff. That wasn't as much of an issue this time. So as Roger said, like maybe this is just an outlier game for these guys, but it was concerning that, it was happening so often. And maybe it wasn't necessarily the cadence as much as it was knowing the Broncos blitz was coming. Like that's entirely possible that these guys were just overzealous because they knew the Broncos were going to blitz. But it was just, the penalties thing. And again, I'll try to save as much as I can for the coaching section because I think I'll have more to say in that section. But penalties has been an issue for this team as long as Robert Saleh has been the coach. It was awful in the second half of last season. They were the most penalized team in the NFL. And the pre-snap penalties are inexcusable, especially that many. And for it, they had 13 penalties called against them and 15 total because 2 were declined. And a lot of them were on offense. So it's an operation that feels a little messy right now. Maybe these guys are still adjusting to Aaron, but it was supposed to not be as much of an adjustment because they kept talking about how good it was going in training camp this year and last year. So there's clearly something missing between Aaron and, certain players on the offensive line and at receiver, which we're going to get into. But I don't know. It was a really, really bad look. What happened on the field, and then the conversations about it after the fact, and all the stuff you've alluded to, like the Rodgers alluding to the lack of focus and the comments from Brees. Like it just again feels like an operation that isn't a well-oiled machine like it should be. And after 10 days, you should not be having these mistakes that you weren't making the first 3 weeks. It should be the opposite. Everything should be flowing perfectly. And maybe if the plays don't execute and, whatever, somebody drops or, whatever, it doesn't work out the way you planned. Like at least you had a good plan going in. It didn't seem like they had a good plan. And maybe cadence is an issue, but it is not my biggest concern coming out of this game.
Second down.
All right. Miscommunication with Rodgers and the offensive line to end first down. Second down, Rodgers seemingly out of sync with some receivers too. Not across the board. Obviously, he threw some dimes. He had some great throws in this game. There was some great catches in this game. But when they needed it most, and we'll single out the fourth quarter and a specific drive, Zach, but 2 throws to Garrett and then an attempted back shoulder to Gibson. It just seemed like they were completely off as far as the page goes, and he was giving glares and guys are just running when he clearly thought they were going to stop. I mean, it just didn't seem like this is a team that's been practicing together since July.
Yeah, the Garrett and Aaron part of it has been the biggest concern so far. I think I've seen some people say, like, so why does he have so much chemistry with Mike Williams when Mike Williams didn't practice all in camp? I wouldn't even necessarily say they have chemistry. I think Mike Williams' skill set begs to you not having to have practice with him a lot because you just have to throw it in his direction kind of thing, like at the sideline, go ball, fade, whatever it is. Like you throw it up and then he's going to go and get it, and that's the idea. And Mike Williams has started to look like the player they thought they were signing.
Mm-hmm.
Lazard and Aaron have played together for so long, so Lazard knows he needs to be where Aaron said you need to be. Whereas I think Garrett's instinct sometimes is to try and improvise to get open, and that was the issue in training camp that they were working through. And by the end of camp, it felt like they'd overcome it. Like Garrett likes to improvise to get open sometimes, whereas Aaron needs his guys to be where they're supposed to be. And last night, Garrett was not where he was supposed to be in Aaron's mind, and that's why you saw what you saw, where he's throwing the ball and Garrett hasn't even turned his head. And it's a problem. We're 4 weeks in, and it doesn't feel like they're any closer to figuring out the problem with Garrett. And that this is a guy that's supposed to be one of the most talented receivers in the NFL. Some of it is on Garrett, some of it's on Aaron, some of it's on coaching, not getting him in the right routes, whatever it is. He's gone against top corners in each of the last 3 games, and they've shut him down. And you can point to that as an excuse, or you can say, well, star receivers are supposed to overcome star corners covering them. And that just hasn't happened. And so the chemistry not being there for Aaron and other receivers outside of Lazard, basically, is concerning. And again, maybe it's something that'll happen over time, but it was supposed to be ready to go at the beginning. And I alluded to all offseason, like I expected some rust at the beginning of the year. I thought by week 4, Aaron and Garrett would have had a better connection than they have so far. And that's kind of like the biggest thing holding back this offense from being really good. And it felt like that was like the one thing missing, even when they had a good game against the Patriots. It's Garrett has not really been involved. His first target, he fumbles away, and maybe Aaron lost trust in him for the rest of the day because he didn't target him again until the third quarter. And, Garrett's really good after the catch, but I don't know. Maybe you need to mix in some different routes, put him in the slot, put him outside, get him the ball in space, get the ball to Garrett Wilson. He's your best playmaker. The chemistry is off between those two. It seems like there's some frustration going in both directions. And the only solution is to just keep working through it. But, it resurfaced today. I saw somebody allude to it. Randall Cobb on Hard Knocks last year, there was like a moment where they're in practice and he's like giving a little pep talk to the receivers. And he says something like, if you're not in the right place, if you're not where you're supposed to be, Aaron is not going to throw you the ball. That's just how he operates. Like, he does not want to throw an interception. So if you're not where he expects you to be, do not expect to get the ball. And so you're seeing Garrett not get the ball, and he wasn't where he was supposed to be in Aaron's mind at the end of the game. And so, you wonder what's going on between those two, and they need to hash it out in some way because it has not been great. Patrick Surtain's probably the best cornerback in the NFL, but it still didn't feel like he necessarily shut him down. I think there were plays where Garrett was open and, Aaron went in other directions or, whatever. I think Garrett is someone who wears his heart on his sleeve. When he's frustrated, you can really see it. He's very emotional, and he's very, very frustrated right now. And you hope that starting next week is when they start to turn it around because, like I said, it's not going to get any easier. There's no excuses now. I think Garrett has less than 200 yards total on the season through 4 games. I thought he would have had close to a 200-yard game by now, frankly, because I thought he was going to go off. So the Garrett and Aaron connection is the most concerning part about the offensive struggles in this game, I would say.
Third down.
All right, third down, you've alluded to it, coaching staff. We can go plenty of directions. Obviously, We've talked about it a lot already as far as the O-line and that stuff. So instead of getting into that more, let's talk about 1st and goal from the 1-yard line in a moment where it felt like this was when the Jets could take control of the football game. They have a rookie running back who is proven to be a bruiser at times.
Yeah.
And Zach, he did not get on the field.
Yeah. So many confounding things about that drive. They wasted a turnover from the defense, but you get 4 plays at the 1-yard line and you hand it off to Brees, gets stuffed. Hand it off to Brees, gets stuffed. You throw an incompletion because Aaron's pressured right away. And then on 4th down, they get a false start and they have to kick a field goal. Not only that, but on the first 3 plays, and I believe on the 3rd play, he was going to target Solomon Thomas. But Solomon Thomas, the defensive tackle, was in at fullback. They did it last week. It was more successful. They decided to roll it back again. I don't know why. You have a defensive, it's fun, it's cute. Look, they have a defensive tackle out there. That's funny. But they claimed a tight end off waivers, Brendan Bates, after training camp, and his one strength that everybody hyped up on him was his ability to run block, and that he's kind of an H-back. And he played 1 snap, I believe, yesterday. And I'm not saying he would have been the solution or they would have scored on those plays because something's off with Brees. And so I don't get why Braylon wasn't in there. Saleh says it's something we'll look at. And he said we're always going to ride Brees as much as we can, but you got to ride the hot hand. At the very minimum, Braylon Allen should be the goal line, the short yardage back at all times. And so it's just so many confounding decisions made by that coaching staff in that sequence. And it looked really, really bad. That was the difference in the game. They lost 10-9. If they score a touchdown there, they win the game. They had 4 plays from the 1 and all they could get was a short field goal. It was just absolutely terrible. And the blocking, they had Solomon Thomas and Max Mitchell in there. I think Olu got beat by JFM on one of the plays to stuff Brees at the line. It's just inexcusable. And that was the most embarrassing sequence of the day. And the best evidence that this coaching staff still hasn't figured out a lot of the issues from last year where they try to get too cute or, you don't just do the obvious thing, which is, last year the obvious thing was throwing Brees Hall the ball more, and it took them a while to figure that out. And it's give your great bruising, powerful back who's running the ball really, really well right now, give him the ball on the 1-yard line. He would have scored. like zero doubt in my mind that Braylon Allen would have scored there. He was running the ball so well yesterday. And if Breece isn't going to look like the explosive player that we've seen, you wonder if this is going to go more towards a 50-50 split until you get the Breece that you were expecting back, because he has not looked like himself. He had some bad penalties. He had a drop. He struggled a little bit in protection. Everything was off for him yesterday, and it's kind of been a little bit off all game. He hasn't had like the huge play that you expect out of him. And I don't know what's off. Maybe there's something there where he's, Braylon Allen's come in and taken a little bit more of the pie than maybe Breece expected. I'm not saying that's why, but I'm not worried about Breece. I think he'll bounce back out of. I'm less worried about him than the whole Garrett conundrum, but especially because you have a Braylon Allen there and waiting. But yeah, that sequence was bad, and yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of coaching parts of this conversation we can hit if you want, but that sequence was alarming, and just overall the fact that, again, I'm going to keep emphasizing this, they had 10 days to prepare for this game, and it didn't feel like they did. I don't know what they did for 10 days, but Robert Saleh did a poor job of getting his team ready. And the fact that you had all these guys talking about a lack of focus, and again, I'm going to keep saying the same things, but like these are buzzwords that do not indicate a well-coached team. And the penalties has been an issue his entire tenure, and he's always said the same thing: we got to figure it out. He has not figured it out. They have not hammered home the penalties. The discipline maybe hasn't been there. In camp they were doing this thing where if an offensive lineman had a false start, he was pulled for a couple plays and then he went back in. That wasn't enough, clearly. I don't know if you need a bench guys or like what it is, but
push-ups.
Push-ups. Joe Judge used to make them run laps. Like, I don't know. But like the lack of discipline is very disappointing for a team that, was saying and doing all the right things. It felt like all offseason, but I don't know, maybe the light training camp and the lack of reps in the preseason has been a downside, because I didn't come out of that game feeling very confident in Hackett and Saleh's ability to turn this around. But, it's a week-to-week league. We felt pretty good about them after week 3. If they go out and surprise us in London and figure things out against the Vikings and really come to play, then the season will look a little different. But coaching was always the biggest question coming into the season, I thought. And maybe I didn't hammer it enough, and maybe in general it wasn't talked about enough, but Hackett and Saleh were always going to be the biggest questions on this team, and they remain the biggest questions to me. So if they're going to keep being undisciplined and get penalized as much as they are, and if you're going to keep using the excuse, well, that's a great defense, well, it was raining out, that I don't know that this is the staff to lead them back to the playoffs.
4th down.
All right, 4th down. The defense was great in the first half. Seemed to tire in the second half. We can get into why that could be. But Bo Nix, first half, -7 passing yards, finished 12 of 25, 60 yards, did throw his first career touchdown pass to Cortland Sutton. So that's one on the Jets as well. Game 4, and he threw his first touchdown pass. But really what beat the Jets in that second half, and beat them, they only gave up 10 points the entire game. But the rushing game did get going in the second half. Javonte Williams had 77 yards, 16 carries. Jaleel McLaughlin, 9 carries, 46 yards. So they got over 126 overall on the ground. Zach, it felt like in the first half, the Broncos were never going to touch the side of the field. In the second half, I did get the vibe that like maybe this defensive line, without as much depth as it used to have, was getting a little bit tired.
Yeah, not only getting tired, but it was a great defensive performance overall while not really getting any pressure up front. So I think maybe there's something to be said about the team they were going against, where Bo Nix was.
No sacks.
No sacks. I think only 3 players had pressures. One of them was Sauce. The other was Will McDonald, who I believe 3. Tack McKinley had 1. They were not getting to the quarterback. I know the Broncos were getting rid of the ball quickly, but when you start playing against better quarterbacks, like it's going to be a bigger problem. But, on the back end, they were really, really good. I thought DJ Reed had an amazing game. Excuse me. I thought Quincy Williams was stellar. And you're supposed to win a game where you hold the opponent to 10 points. Like, it doesn't, whatever you want to criticize them for, giving up rushing attack, like Broncos are trying to run out the clock later, and they had some holes on the defensive line and all that. Sure. I think they were missing CJ Mosley in that fourth quarter. I think that's where you started to see like where CJ brings the most, like just having everybody in the right place. That's a big part of what he does. But, Aaron Rodgers, and I looked this up last night, he's only lost one other game in his career where his defense gave up 10 or fewer points, and that was in 2010. as a lot of Jets fans were joking, that was the year they won the Super Bowl when that happened. But this is the second time in his entire career where the defense gave up 10 or fewer points and he lost. And that was the whole idea when he came here was like, you give Aaron Rodgers a good defense, he's going to win most of the time. Like, because if you just look historically, that's what happens. And that's why this felt like 2023, because it was the same stuff, not converting on third down, the penalties, not scoring in the red zone, and wasting a good defensive performance. Like it was bad. And, again, it's only going to get harder. You have Sam Darnold playing like an MVP right now. Next week, you have Josh Allen the week after that. You have CJ Stroud a couple weeks after that. It's not going to get any easier if they're not getting to the quarterback, and it's not going to get any easier, if the offense isn't scoring. So I feel a little bit better about the defense than I did a week ago. Like overall, I don't feel great about the pass rush still. I think it's still a major concern. And if Hassan Reddick's not going to be a Jet, which it feels like he won't be, I think maybe at some point Joe Douglas needs to go and get, whether it's defensive tackle or defensive end, to help this group, because, they tried to switch things up with the young guys. Braden McGregor was inactive for the first time. They activated Eric Watts. I don't think I noticed him. Leonard Taylor was inactive. I think it's gotten a little overhyped in terms of like how much of an impact he can make as an undrafted rookie, but they need somebody who can penetrate and make an impact on that defensive line. Lecky Fotu might be back pretty soon. I think he's going to practice this week. He would help in the running game in theory. He's not a star by any means. There's a reason why they were able to get him for cheap, but it's like the opposite of last week, and it's like last year. Like I didn't come out of that game as worried about the defense. I think Jeff Ulbrich is still really good at his job. They didn't really blitz as much in this game, but if the Jets are going to be wasting 10-point defensive efforts, then they're going to be in for a long season.
And it was tough seeing JFM playing well. On the other
he played
side
really well
too. Yeah. All right. Anything else? We're going to, be back obviously in a couple of days to get everyone ready for the trip across the Atlantic and some breakfast football coming up next week. But anything else from this one, Zach, before we say goodbye?
We'll say Taylor Delgado just pointed out that at least Arizona beat Utah. He's very right. The Wildcats went out and beat a highly ranked Utah team. I went to bed before the game because I was a bad fan. And also I go to bed early because it was at like 10:30, but I woke up to a win, which is great. But yeah, Jets wise, you're looking at if CJ Mosley's going to come back, there's going to be a big topic of Sam Darnold this week, obviously. And we'll get into that later in the week. I'm flying to London Wednesday night. I'm looking forward to this trip. And if any of our flight plan listeners are going to be out in London, you should let us know. Cause it'd be cool to see you guys out there. But yeah, it's, this is going to be a season defining week, even if they don't necessarily beat the Vikings, like the effort needs to be better. And so like I said, we're going to look back at this game as a turning point in the season, either in the good or bad direction. And I have no idea which way it's going to go. Jets history says it won't go good. You hope that because Aaron Rodgers is here, that'll change things. But yeah, I'm kind of in wait and see mode again, where I'm not really ready to say this is going to be like a contender. So it's a big week coming up, and very curious to see how they handle it.
Yeah, lots of eyes will be on them, which is sometimes doesn't go well for the Jets, but we'll see. And we'll be with you, like I said, on Wednesday to get you ready for that game against the Vikings. Thanks for tuning in to the 4 Downs edition of Flight Plan. We'll talk to everybody again soon.